6 years after Melissa Hart stepped into the wild, her backpack turned up in a cave, and the signal from her radio was still pulsing. What came next defied everything investigators thought they knew about survival and disappearance. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. I read every single one. Melissa Hart wasn't just another hiker. She was a true devotee of the wild, someone whose pulse quickened at the very mention of unexplored trails and hidden groves. Friends described her as fiercely independent, but not reckless. She prepared meticulously for every journey, never leaving anything to chance. Yet there was something different about this trip. The North Ridge forests, stretching endlessly across ancient hills, had left a lasting impression on her after a short day hike with her brother Daniel several weeks earlier. Melissa had returned from that excursion restless and inspired, drawn to the wilderness in a way that bordered on obsession. Her plan was ambitious: 5 days navigating steep trails, remote valleys, and tangled woods, a route she and her longtime friend Max had mapped across countless lunches at their architectural firm. They had compared gear, marked potential campsites, and traced landmarks, the planning becoming a shared escape from the monotony of city life. But on the eve of their departure, Max was struck by a sudden, violent illness, his voice weak with apology. "Go without me," he croaked. But Melissa hesitated, loyalty tugging at her, the call of the mountains pulling harder. After much deliberation and Daniel's gentle warnings, Melissa made up her mind. She'd already taken time off, mapped an exact route, and trained for the challenge. She would go alone. Her brother tried to mask his concern with encouragement, reminding her to stay on the main trails and keep in touch, their daily phone calls a ritual. Melissa appreciated the advice, but felt ready for solitude. That night, she loaded her blue sleeping bag, bright orange cap, trail snacks, and meticulously labeled map into her car. She texted Daniel, "Trailhead at sunrise. We'll check in when filthy and alive." Her confidence shone through, but so did her determination. The following morning, Melissa arrived at the trailhead, an isolated gravel parking lot tucked beneath ancient oaks. She locked her car, double-checked her backpack, snapped a quick selfie for Daniel, and turned toward the beckoning woods. The air was brisk, the world waking beneath a pale sun. The only sound was the low hum of wind moving through leaves, a prelude to silence. Throughout the day, Daniel followed his routine: work, errands, and every so often, a glance at his phone for a reassuring message. Evening settled with no word from Melissa. He reasoned away his anxiety. Maybe she'd lost service. Maybe the hike was tougher than expected. Perhaps she'd camped out, eager for the stars and quiet. Night deepened, and with it, a gnawing unease crept in. When another sunrise came and still no message, Daniel's concern flared into dread. Attempts to reach Melissa went unanswered. After hours of waiting and the mounting weight of silence, Daniel made the call to the local authorities. He provided every detail: her age, the car make and color, her route map, her gear list, even the last photo sent 2 weeks prior, her smile framed by moss and sunlight. The sheriff's office dispatched a ranger to the trailhead. The car was found as Melissa had left it, a solitary witness to her disappearance. Within hours, the search for Melissa Hart began. Her last journey now the heart of a mystery that the wildlands would guard fiercely. As dawn crept across the North Ridge, the search for Melissa Hart began in earnest, a collision of hope, urgency, and the sobering reality of wilderness. The local sheriff's department coordinated with park rangers, quickly transforming the once tranquil trailhead into the epicenter of a growing operation. Fold-out tables appeared beside Melissa's car, now dusted with pollen and parked beneath the same ancient oaks she'd admired. On those tables, topographical maps and grid overlays charted a landscape more daunting by the hour. Melissa's family arrived, led by Daniel, who clung to the photo he'd sent authorities, a candid shot of Melissa perched on a mossy branch, alive with joy. Behind that image, the volunteers and professionals assembled, a mosaic of expertise and concern. Veteran rangers briefed teams, pointing out the most treacherous ravines, fast-running creeks, and dense thickets notorious for tripping up even the most seasoned hikers. Spectrums of experience converged. Sheriff deputies, search and rescue volunteers, and dog handlers with K9 units ready to follow the faintest vestige of Melissa's scent. The strategy was straightforward, yet daunting. Searchers would begin at the trailhead, moving outward on Melissa's intended route, branching into adjoining hillsides, creek beds, and overgrown slopes. Smaller teams targeted the periphery, places where someone might slip off the main path or become trapped out of sight. Rangers explained that the mountains had a deceptive calm, masking sudden drops, hidden hollows, and labyrinthine thickets of rhododendron and laurel. Daniel rotated between hope and despair, greeting each new team of volunteers, watching as they reviewed routes and packed provisions. Night after night, he tried not to imagine Melissa alone and frightened. The command post buzzed with activity, radios bursting with updates, strategists revising seer. Pitch grids, officers updating logs and noting every small clue. Helicopters soon arrived, slicing through morning mist with thermal cameras, trying to pierce the dense, leafy canopy below. But the forest was unyielding. From the air, it was a sea of green, masking every secret. On the ground, the realities of the wilderness became more apparent. K9 units were given Melissa's shirt to track, but the forest's damp ground and swirling winds quickly muddled any clean scent trail. Searchers left more footprints in bent grass than any evidence of Melissa herself. The woods offered nothing, not a broken branch, not a dropped granola bar, not even a faded footprint. Even experienced trackers admitted the challenge was immense. The terrain was rugged. One misstep could lead to a twisted ankle or worse. Yet the teams pressed on, driven by the hope of a rescue rather than a recovery. The days blended into routine, a surge of organized activity in the morning, exhaustion by evening, then a muted retreat under starlit skies. By the end of the first week, frustration set in. Volunteers from 3 counties had joined the effort, bringing their own skills and perseverance. But still, the forest refused to surrender any truth. On the 8th day, hope briefly flared. A team found a turquoise scrap caught on a thorn, igniting new energy at camp. Teams converged on the swampy, muddied lowland. For 2 days, searchers battled dense underbrush, biting insects, and ankle-deep mire. Every effort, every ounce of optimism was poured into that thorn bush. Yet under the scrutiny of experts, the turquoise scrap revealed itself to be from an old fishing vest, not the high-tech jacket Melissa had worn. The discovery and the realization that it was unrelated hit with the force of heartbreak. 2 days of effort, hope, and fear amounted to nothing. The collective mood turned grim, the searchers realizing just how silent the North Ridge could be when it chose to keep its secrets. As weather began to turn, bringing cold rain and thick fog, the practical dangers to the searchers rose. On the 14th day, the search commander sat with Daniel and explained gently but firmly. Every trail had been searched, every lead pursued, but no sign of Melissa had been found. The massive, coordinated search was suspended with heavy hearts, though the case would remain open. The tents came down, the gear was packed away, and the trucks and cruisers faded down winding roads, leaving behind Melissa's car, unmoving in the solitude of the wild. For Daniel and those who loved Melissa, the search did not end, but the hope for answers remained trapped within the indifferent heart of the forest. As the weeks slipped away, the wildlands began to reclaim their silence. The once busy command post faded, replaced by scattered reminders. A faded flagging tape on a branch, trampled grass near the riverbank, a coffee cup discarded by hope. With the suspension of the main search, Melissa's fate grew more uncertain by the day. For Daniel, the world had shrunk to a constant, weighty ache. Every passing hour, a reminder of Melissa's absence. He returned often to the trailhead, the blue sedan, a monument to unanswered questions, and followed empty paths through the shifting undergrowth, calling his sister's name into the stillness of the woods. Friends, family, and determined volunteers organized smaller weekend searches. Each group brought new optimism, sometimes mapping out narrow ravines or rechecking creek beds in hopes that something had been missed. The mountain's autumn transformation was both beautiful and cruel. A golden carpet of leaves softened the landscape, but also buried all traces of movement. Melissa's trail grew colder and more obscured with every falling leaf. The optimism that had driven the first phase morphed into grim resolve. Daniel saw it in the faces of friends who had canceled plans, taken days off work, and endured long, exhausting hours combing the woods. Every possible scenario ran endlessly through his mind. Did Melissa fall and injure herself? Was she lost, surviving off the land, waiting to be found? Would she suddenly step out of the trees, tired, hungry but safe, her story one of miraculous endurance? But as October faded into November, the questions remained unanswered. The North Ridge seemed impossibly vast and indifferent, a labyrinth where a single person could vanish, leaving behind little more than hope and memory. Search parties dwindled with the cold, their numbers thinning as the reality of the odds sank in. The world outside moved forward, work deadlines, family gatherings, holidays passing in a dull procession, but for those closest to Melissa, time became elastic, sometimes sluggish, sometimes speeding past. At home, Daniel found it harder to sleep. He kept Melissa's belongings in boxes, her hiking journal, the patch from her backpack, the orange cap she'd loved. Every item carried a memory and a wish for closure. Melissa's apartment was eventually emptied, its everyday charms. Objects transformed into silent tokens of her absence. The architectural firm replaced her position, colleagues sent notes of sympathy, but the void was most painfully felt in the quiet moments. The police formally changed Melissa's file to inactive, pending new information. The language stung, so clinical, so final. But Daniel refused to let the matter rest. He maintained contact with search coordinators and cold case detectives, sharing leads and suggestions, motivated by a loyalty more powerful than time itself. Still, the case drifted further from the headlines. Melissa Hart became a whisper among hikers, her story a cautionary tale, a ghost haunting the silences of the wild. As the year closed, Daniel stared out his window at the rolling horizon, knowing Melissa was out there somewhere, gone, but never truly lost. The mountain had chosen to keep its secret, and for now, that secret would remain buried beneath layers of leaves, shadows, and the relentless procession of days. The crushing disappointment settled on those left behind, but so did the stubborn hope that someday, all at once or bit by bit, the forest might finally let Melissa's story be told. Months passed, and grief became a quiet companion in Daniel's life, a slow, persistent ache that permeated everything. Melissa's absence transformed the family's routines. Holidays grew quieter, celebrations became subdued, and each day that began without her was colored with hollow uncertainty. Her hiking gear remained boxed in Daniel's garage, the artifacts of a life vibrant and unfinished. Every so often, Daniel would linger over her journals, reading the meticulous notes she'd made about landscapes, wildlife sightings, and the inner workings of her restless mind. Melissa's wider circle, friends, former colleagues, hiking enthusiasts, kept her memory alive through gatherings and online forums. Occasionally, snippets of loose theories surfaced, some hopeful, some grim. Sightings in distant towns, rumors of a lost hiker living off the land, speculation about amnesia or deliberate disappearance. Daniel clung to two, his stories despite their fragility. For him, hope now flickered in smaller ways, a familiar-looking silhouette in a crowd, a chance message from a search and rescue volunteer. The official status of Melissa's case, inactive, pending new information, served as both shield and sword. It meant the police remained open to new leads, but it also formalized a stalemate, a bureaucratic twilight between desperate hope and silent resignation. Daniel maintained his dialogue with Detective Wallace, a seasoned investigator assigned to cold cases in the region. Wallace was quiet, methodical, the kind of man who rarely made promises but never gave up on unraveling a mystery. He kept Melissa's file on his desk, a constant reminder that sometimes even the most routine adventures can descend into the unexplained. In late summer 2019, that unexplained silence was shattered. News broke of another disappearance, a solo hiker, young and experienced, gone missing over 100 miles south of Melissa's last known location. The story shook the hiking community. Pieced together through frantic news reports and grim conversations, it emerged that the woman's body had eventually been found, hidden in a shallow grave beside a popular trail. The details of her death were brutal, personal, and unclear. Local law enforcement cautioned about the dangers of solo hiking. Families re-examined their own routines, and whispers of a lurking predator rippled across forums and campgrounds. Detective Wallace viewed the case as more than a tragic coincidence. His job was to look for patterns where others saw isolated incidents, and he pulled up Melissa's file to cross-reference every detail. On paper, the two cases contrasted starkly. Melissa's story was defined by absence, the newer case by chilling presence. But the underlying facts, a lone capable woman vanishing in the perceived safety of wilderness, haunt Ed Wallace, unsettling his professional instincts. He reached out to Daniel, sharing his unease. "Sometimes the mountains keep secrets longer than anyone expects," Wallace mused, flipping through old police reports. In those conversations, old memories surfaced. The night Melissa had joked about being filthy and alive, the certainty she would return, the way her independence shone through every plan she made. Now that independence seemed both her greatest strength and her most tragic vulnerability. Wallace widened his investigation, meeting with Melissa's friends, rechecking alibis, and revisiting medical records from the days surrounding her departure. Max, her hiking partner, was questioned again. His urgent care records and the testimony of medical staff proved his debilitating illness. The detectives pressed further, examining money trails, reviewing travel records, canvassing distant towns. Still, nothing linked Melissa's disappearance to the darker fate of the other hiker. As the anniversary of Melissa's vanishing approached, dread mingled with grief, a sense that the wilderness might hide something more sinister than accident or misadventure. Daniel waited, hoping for closure, but fearing new revelations. In the silence of those long nights, the forest outside his window seemed alive with secrets, while inside he clung to the hope that somewhere Melissa's voice was waiting to be heard once again. 6 years had slipped by since Melissa Hart's disappearance, and for most, memories of the story had faded into the vast catalog of wilderness mysteries. Daniel and Detective Wallace, however, kept the case alive, tracing any rumor and revisiting old notes in search of even the smallest break. Life continued its patient march, but in the forest that once captivated Melissa, secrets waited beneath every moss-covered stone. In October 2023, a new chapter emerged, not from law enforcement or grieving family, but from a Sumumau trio of amateur explorers with a peculiar obsession for the Earth's hidden signals. Members of the Ridge Geological Group, Marcus, Ben, and Leo, were not searching for lost hikers. Instead, their weekends were spent chasing geological and electromagnetic anomalies, using sophisticated instruments to discover unexplored caves, fault lines, and mineral deposits in the region's ancient terrain. That Saturday, their EMF meter, a sensitive device called the Latinx AF5000, suddenly registered an unusual pulse as they trekked through a dense, sloping section of North Ridge. Marcus paused, watching red bars rise on the meter's display. The readings were inexplicably strong, focused within a small, shifting radius, 20, 45, then 87 units, far higher than anything they'd recorded before. Puzzled, the group scoured the forest floor, pushing away fallen leaves and probing a web of roots. Their search led to the base of a toppled tree, where a jagged fissure split the earth, a narrow cave entrance hidden in plain sight. Inside the fissure, the air grew cold and damp. Marcus clipped into a rope and lowered himself, his headlamp revealing a vertical chamber, black as obsidian and stretching further than his light could reach. Ben and Leo anchored him outside, nerves taut as Marcus descended into the silent unknown. After 10 feet, the crack widened. Marcus hung in open space, suspended over a vast pit whose depths were lost in darkness. As his eyes adjusted, the light caught something unusual far below, a small heap of fabric and gear, faded but distinct against the rock walls. Marcus thought first of old mining equipment or a hunter's forgotten camp, but the EMF readings kept him searching higher up, near the mouth of the fissure. Fumbling in a dry alcove, his fingers closed around a cold, rectangular object wedged among rocks, a weathered two-way radio, its casing marked by years of EOS exposure. Back on the surface, the group examined their discoveries. The radio wasn't just a relic, it was still intermittently transmitting a faint signal, the source of the mysterious EMF spike. Realizing the gravity of their find, Marcus dialed 911 from a satellite phone. Within hours, local deputies and technical specialists converged on the site, their faces grave as they listened to how a hobby turned into a potential breakthrough in a missing person case. Cave rescue teams prepared a technical descent, their brightly colored ropes contrasting the muted tones of autumn leaves. Daniel was notified and rushed to the scene, heart thudding with reluctant hope. As rescue personnel reached the bottom of the fissure, they documented a faded blue sleeping bag and a large beige backpack. In the sunlight, Daniel instantly recognized Melissa's hand-sewn patch on the backpack, a piece of his sister's story, undisturbed for 6 long years. None of the teams found human remains at the site, nor any conclusive evidence of a body. But the presence of Melissa's gear and the still-active radio reset the investigation with thrilling urgency. Detective Wallace oversaw the scene, ensuring every fragment was meticulously logged and analyzed. Forensics experts in the state lab soon made an astonishing announcement. The lithium batteries in the radio were not nearly as old as the disappearance. Based on their remaining charge and condition, the radio had likely been placed within the past 18 months, possibly as late as spring 2022. Wallace faced the staggering implications. Someone, quite possibly Melissa herself, had returned to or survived in that cave years after her supposed vanishing. The wilderness had offered up a clue, but along with it, new questions, deeper mysteries, and the possibility that Melissa's journey in the wildlands had endured far longer than anyone imagined. Detective Wallace S. stood at the precipice of the fissure, staring into the shadowy depths where Melissa Hart's gear had rested for so many years. The revelation that the radio had been activated recently, years after her disappearance, turned the whole investigation upside down. No longer was the team simply searching for remains or closure. Now, they might be hunting for a miraculous survivor, or for answers even stranger than before. Wallace assembled a multidisciplinary team, forensic experts, cave rescue specialists, and speleologists who mapped the underground passages with painstaking precision. The first detailed survey revealed a sprawling network far larger than anyone had anticipated. The fissure was not an isolated drop. It was the gateway to miles of chambers and tunnels stretching under the ridge, some large enough to walk upright, others winding and cramped, forming a subterranean world largely untouched by human feet. Led by laser measurements and drone exploration, the team discovered a second entrance. Unlike the perilous vertical crack, this one was a wide arch in the hillside, hidden behind dense vegetation and animal trails, sloping gently into the earth. Near this entrance, in a sheltered alcove, they found the first true pieces of Melissa's life after her disappearance. A makeshift fire pit, circled by blackened stones. Forensic analysis of the ash told a story of repeated use, layers showing fires built and rebuilt over the course of months or years. Scattered near the ashes were tiny, brittle bones, squirrels, rabbits, birds, all native to the forest. Alongside them, several sharpened sticks blackened at the tip, their ends hardened by fire. These weren't just leftover kindling, they were crafted tools, evidence of hunting and primitive cooking. Melissa, it seemed, had found a way to survive in the depths, transforming herself from seasoned hiker to cave-dwelling survive. Or, the team reconstructed what might have happened. Perhaps, after an injury, maybe from a fall into the fissure, Melissa had been trapped, using her sleeping bag for warmth and rationing whatever food she carried. Driven by desperation and skill, she could have gradually mended herself, using the radio to try to signal for help. At some point, she braved the maze of tunnels, finally discovering the larger walkout entrance, gaining access to fresh air, daylight, and a new route for survival. Unable to return easily to the fissure, and possibly without working flashlight batteries, she may have left the radio as a signal for rescuers, her last connection to the outside world. The psychological toll of such isolation and resourcefulness was unimaginable. The evidence painted a portrait of resilience, an ordinary person facing extraordinary circumstances and enduring beyond expectation. Investigators speculated about Melissa's physical and emotional state. Had she tried to find her way out, only to get lost again? Was she injured beyond full recovery, living in the wilderness's fringes and eluding contact? The cave itself became a character in the unfolding drama, its cold chambers and hidden exits shaping a narrative of transformation and endurance. Wallace, studying every newly discovered artifact, felt both awe and heartbreak. Melissa's survival was plausible, but it also begged further questions. If she escaped, why hadn't she sought help? Why hadn't she contacted Daniel or authorities? What compelled her, after years as a ghost in the forest, to stay hidden or walk away? As the forensic sweep wound down, one thing was clear. Melissa's story had not ended with her disappearance. The will to survive had left indelible marks on the underground world, and if answers existed, they would be found in the interplay between darkness, instinct, and the relentless hope that had sustained her journey. The wilderness had given up some of its secrets, but the most profound mystery was yet to be solved. As winter crept into 2024, the investigation into Melissa Hart's disappearance stood on the brink of revelation and frustration. The cave, the radio, and the evidence of survival painted a story unlike any case Detective Wallace had handled before. Yet the central question lingered. If Melissa had survived for years, where did she go? And why did she vanish again so close to rescue? The breakthrough arrived not from a police tip or new forensic clue, but as a stroke of pure, random chance. George Petrie, a local hunter and amateur naturalist, was sorting through memory cards from his network of trail cameras, a collection he used to track wildlife movements across remote stretches of private woodland. One camera, neglected for months, recorded a short, grainy video during the pre-dawn hours of August 14, 2022. Curious, George watched the 15-second clip. Amid the eerie glow of infrared, a solitary figure appeared on the overgrown logging path, moving with slow but deliberate steps. Long matted hair swung over angular shoulders. Dark, tattered clothes clung to an emaciated frame. Animals would have been startled by the human presence, but the figure marched steadily onward, briefly turning at the faint click of the camera's sensor. For a fleeting moment, the person's profile was illuminated. High cheekbones, a sharp jawline, hollow eyes that matched the aura of someone who had lived too long on their own. George's heart pounded. He recognized the familiar features. Melissa Hart, alive and walking less than 2 years after her disappearance, in the exact area near the second cave entrance. The date was a precise fit with the forensic timeline of the walkie-talkie's battery life. He replayed the footage, each viewing deepening both wonder and dread. He immediately alerted the sheriff's department, sending the clip to Detective Wallace. The discovery reshaped the entire file with a new urgency and a sense of awe. Wallace watched the video over and over, stunned by its implications. Melissa had escaped the cave, survived alone, and made it within 5 miles of a state highway. The logging path she traveled, mapped out in old forestry records, eventually crossed into the main artery of civilization, a road where a lone woman could have been picked up, aided, or, if luck faltered, encountered someone dangerous. News of the trail camera footage spread quickly. Investigators flooded the nearby towns and hamlets, interviewing business owners, truck drivers, and residents. Melissa's updated photograph, her sharper, older features, was posted at local diners and rest stops along the highway. The efforts stretched in a widening net, but no one recalled seeing a hitchhiker. No driver remembered a gaunt woman on the shoulder in the pre-dawn light, and no family reported picking up a stranger in distress. So the image from the trail camera became the final, tangible proof of Melissa Hart's journey, a moment of hope balanced on the edge of civilization. She was alive, purposeful, and just one narrow stretch of road away from potential salvation. But like every phase of her story, the trail ended there. The wilderness had let her go, yet the world beyond offered not a single answer. To Daniel, Wallace, and all who followed the twists and heartbreak of Melissa's case, the final trace served only to sharpen the mystery and the ache of the unknown. The longing remained. Had Melissa survived only to slip forever into anonymity? Had she met a fate darker than the wild silence so close to re-entry? Or, perhaps bravest of all, was she out there still, walking a new path deep within the archives of the world? The case of Melissa Hart lingered as both a wound and an enigma, unanswered and unforgettable. With the discovery of her gear in the cavern, the trail camera footage, and the evidence of hard-won survival, her story transcended the boundaries of a simple disappearance. It became a legend among hikers, investigators, and online mystery communities, a tale echoing through campfire conversations and chilly mountain winds. For Daniel, his sister's absence was a daily reality. He saw her everywhere, in shadows cast by swaying trees, in smiles across crowded rooms, in the box of faded gear that held court in his garage. Melissa's journals remained a private oracle, filled with sketches and half-written thoughts that hinted at her relentless longing for discovery. As weeks faded into months, Daniel found himself searching less for facts and more for threads of closure, a letter, a sighting, a story that might give form to the space Melissa left behind. Detective Wallace, too, was changed. He kept Melissa's file open on his desk, its edges worn from re-examination. The investigation had run its course through logic and intuition, through days spent in cave systems and nights puzzling over forensic reports. Wallace believed he'd seen most things in his decades on the job, but Melissa's journey confounded the limits of ordinary explanation. The wilderness had always been unforgiving, but in Melissa's case, it seemed almost purposeful, a partner to both her resilience and her fate. Speculation flourished. Was Melissa's last trek a deliberate break from her old self, a chosen journey into anonymity? Or was she lost, surviving beyond the edges of ordinary endurance only to falter in the shadow of help? Some wondered if, after escaping the cave, she had simply slipped away, starting a new life far from the pain of her past. Others feared that she met a darker fate, perhaps a prowler on the highway, invisible until it was too late. These possibilities haunted everyone who followed the case. None could be ruled out, and all were equally heartbreaking. Melissa's story took on a mythic quality. Her perseverance, surviving for years beneath the mountain's skin, became a symbol of both hope and isolation. She lived beyond what anyone could have expected, defying odds, natural elements, and despair. Her final steps toward civilization, caught by a single burst of infrared light, embodied the courage it takes to move forward when every path is uncertain. In the world of hikers and wanderers, Melissa's legend deepened. Her cautionary tale changed how many approached the wilderness, the importance of leaving a trail, having backup plans, and respecting the secrets that mountains may keep. Online, communities debated her fate, new eyes poring over old clues, viewers spinning theories from the smallest fragments of evidence. For Daniel, every year became a ritual of remembrance. He hiked north when he could, sometimes revisiting Melissa's favorite clearings, leaving small mementos on mossy stones. In moments of quiet, he found solace in the thought that his sister's spirit lived on in every explorer who braved the unknown with hope. Though the world never found all its answers, Melissa Hart's story insisted on being told, both warning and inspiration to everyone who stands at the edge of mystery, looking for what lies beyond. And so the mystery remains, unsolved and unforgettable, suspended between forest and memory, darkness and light. Melissa's journey is not just a story of loss, but of relentless searching, quiet endurance, and the wild, endless hope that somewhere a secret might yet be revealed. Before you go, remember, some mysteries linger, waiting for new eyes and fresh theories. If you're drawn to the unexplained, the unresolved, and the untold, keep watching the Witness Archives. There are countless secrets left in the shadows. Join us as we uncover the stories the world forgot Subscribe now and never miss the next twist in the unknown.